Hey there, my fellow lunatics, and welcome to Dakon's Madhouse. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, today we are doing our maximum level Helms, and while there is no special surprise, we are still going to go through all of them and rank them all from S tier to F tier. Let's get started with the rules, and I won't waste your time anymore. Number 1. All items are fully upgraded to level 18. Number 2. I am assuming that the player is at the end game and trying to figure out what is the best weapon overall. Number 3. Different playstyles can alter the rankings of various weapons for different people. I try to stay neutral and take all playstyles into account. Hopefully, I don't let my biases show too much. And number 4. All items are reinforced, because in the end game, you have no excuse not to keep your gear reinforced at all times. Starting with the S tier. This is the top tier. These are going to be our super versatile items, the best of the best, things that are used in multiple builds. A tier, those are going to be excellent items. Top tier for at least one build, and often versatile, but not necessarily the best of the best. B tier are strong items that you really aren't going to complain about, but they have limited use or are eventually outclassed by other items. C tier, these items are fine. You can't go wrong with them, but you will eventually replace them, or you are going to replace them pretty quickly. D tier, maybe these items have a little bit of a niche use, but otherwise they're really not that useful or worthwhile. And F tier, the item is trash, it's not any good, don't bother using it. Starting off with the Adventurer's Helm, I'm putting this one into A tier, as this is a pretty solid general purpose helm. I mean, look at those numbers. This thing is strong. I mean, even though general purpose isn't as great in the end game, this is. The Assassin's Hood, this one goes into C tier, and honestly, I keep looking at this and I just find it underwhelming, but at the same time, it's not bad, so I just threw it here because I really didn't know what else to do with it. The Atlantean Worm Helm, S tier, no questions, best helm in the game. The Bronze Helm, this one's going into B tier, as this one is almost as good as the Miner's Helm, so if you don't have that yet, then this one is pretty solid. The Carapace Helm, this one is our first D tier of the day, and it is still excellent for explosive builds, but it just loses its mining effectiveness at this point. Our C tier is the Caveling Hood here, and it is one of the best melee damage helms, but the rest of the stats really aren't all that great. The Cooking Pot Lid, this one's going right into the F tier, as it really just has no real value in the end game. The same is also true of the Copper Helm, it's just not really all that good in the end game. However, in the end game, the Cosmos Visor is pretty good, and that one's going to go into B tier, because when you don't need as much on the mining damage front, this one adds really good offensive capabilities to kind of turn your mining build into a mining melee build. The Diving Helm, this one's also going into B tier, as it is an excellent fishing helm. When you want those rare fish, this is the helm that'll help you get those fish. The Farmer's Hat also going into B tier, because holy crap, 15% HP regen? What? That's really, really good. I mean, yeah, it's a harvest helm, but 15% HP regen? Wow! The Festive Hat, F tier. Its stats are low, the regen is really weak. The Frankenbrute Hat, this one, however, is going into C tier, because it's really not as bad. It's barely got better hit points and armor than the Pumpkin Helm, and it's got knockback, which can be pretty good if you're getting overwhelmed. So this is kind of not great, but not that bad either. The Galaxite Helm, I'm going to throw this one into C tier, because the helm really isn't that bad, but compared to Ninja or the Atlantean Worm Helm, it's just not good either. The Gingerbread Hood, this one's going into F tier. Low stats, and just everything in it is just not worth it. The Gingerbread Mask, same thing. The food drain doesn't matter in the end game, and it's got low stats. The God Sent King Mask, this one I'm putting into A tier, as It's a good general purpose damage helm, and those soul power boosts are pretty nice too. The hazmat helm, I'm throwing this one into D tier. I mean, while it's really not that bad, there's just a lot of better. The Hivebone helm surprised me. This one I'm putting into B tier, because if you're willing to sacrifice some thorns, you can get some extra attack speed, which, depending on the weapon you're using, might be really useful. Next up, we've got the Hunter's Hood, and this one is going into D tier. Yeah, the Ranger Hood really is just better than this one in the end game, so spend your resources on that instead. The Iron Helm, this one I'm putting into B tier, as it's a pretty solid damage helm, but there are better damage helms at this point. The King Slime Crown, this one is a D tier item, as the stats really just aren't that great anymore, but becoming friendly to the slime faction is still useful, even in late game and end game for some exploration. The Larva Helm I'm also putting into D tier because the movement speed penalty for this just really makes it a lot less useful at the end game, especially when you have other mining helm options like the Cosmos and the Miner's Helm. The Magma Horn Helm, this one I'm putting into B tier. It is best in slot for a burn build, provided that you are using a pet cat that has the instant burn ability on it. If you're not, then you might want to consider the Shaman Helm still, just for that burn burst damage. The Mercenary Headband is going to go into A tier. While it lacks armor, it's still really good for exploration and for DPS. The Mining Helm should be no surprise. This one is an S tier item. It is the best mining helm in the game. The Mold Web Helm, though, really not that great. I'm throwing it into D tier. The attack speed isn't that bad, but there are just other helms with lower upgrade costs that can do this for you. The Ninja Cowl, S tier, all the way. It is the second best helm in the game, even at the end game. If you don't have the Atlantean Worm Helm yet, this one is going to be your helm, especially since it's easier to get. A Octarine Helm, I'm throwing this one into C tier because if you want mining speed, then this is still a good helm. Omeros Helm has fallen from grace though. It started great, but now it is in D tier as it just does not level up well. Its endgame stats are just weak. The Paladin Mask, I'm actually throwing this one into F tier as its upgrades are terrible. There are tons of other helms that are better, don't bother. The Peasant Mask also going into F tier as it's just not all that viable at endgame. It has really good dodge, but so does the Ninja Gear. And that's all it has. The Plague Mask. This thing really impressed me when it first came out. But unfortunately in the endgame it's not quite as impressive, and I'm throwing it into B tier as many of its stats really just aren't as good. Now the chance not to die is still really strong, and that's kind of why it's still in B tier, but you probably are going to end up replacing it at some point. The Pot Lid, this one is going right into F tier. The Ninja Helm is better in every way, so don't waste your resources leveling this thing to 18. The Pumpkin Head, this one is going into C tier as it's got really good hit points and armor, but that's pretty much it. A little glow. It's not as good as it was before there was a lantern slot. The Radical Rabbit Ears, I'm putting these unfortunately into F tier. As much as I love them, they just are outclassed by the Ninja Helm. The Ranger Hood, this one is going into A tier. It is still the best in slot for range damage helms. The Scarab Visor, this one is also going into A tier as it's got excellent Thorns bonuses. For endgame, Thorns is great, Crit's great, and it's useful in a variety of builds, but it's mostly useful with the Thorns build, so that keeps it out of S tier. The Scarlet Helm, well, unfortunately this one is F tier as it's just outclassed in every way at this point. The Scholar's Hood, this one I'm throwing into D tier. In its current state, it's just confused and doesn't really do anything well, but hopefully in the 1.0 update, they're going to revamp it and it'll be a little bit better. Fingers crossed. The Sentry Helm, I'm also throwing this one into D tier, as the armor and the hit points is nice, but really the helm's just kind of niche and you're not going to get that much use out of it in the end game. The Shaman Skull, I'm putting this one into B tier as I think this is the best endgame burn helm, but again, it really depends on what you're using. Are you using the cat? Are you not? If you are using the cat, does the cat have the burst damage built into it or not? You know, there's a lot of variables as to what's better, the Shaman Helm or the Magma Helm. The Shroomman Cap, this is an F tier helm, unfortunately. Its stats are weak, it's gimmicky with its food ability, and it just has no real use in the endgame. The Skirmisher Hat, this one I'm throwing into C tier, as it's got a decent range speed boost, but it's just kind of outclassed in the endgame. The Slime Helm, this one, wow, this one I'm putting into B tier. It's a lot better than I thought it would. The stats are good, but there are just better helms, even if you're looking for raw damage percentage. But you get it early enough that it still has some viability once you hit endgame. The Snowman Hat, I'm throwing this one into F tier. It just has no real value in the endgame. It's great at the beginning, but it drops off quick. The Solarite Barbute, this one I'm putting into A tier. It is the best in slot for a lifesteal build, and lifesteal builds aren't that bad. The Spooky Blanket Hood, this one is going into D tier, as it has a little bit of use because that dodge chance is solid, but really that's all it offers, and you know, that extra 1% dodge just isn't worth what you give up. The Sunglasses, well, these are also D tier. There's no denying they're best in slot for dodge, but that's all that they do. And I can sacrifice that little bit of dodge percentage for all the other stuff that I get from the Ninja Helm. The Wild Warden Mask, I'm putting this one into C tier. If you're using an attack pet, this is excellent. If you're using an Owl Lux, it's useless. So right in the middle for me. And we're going to end it up with the Wooden Helm, which goes right into F tier because really it just has no value in the end game. Great at the beginning, but that's it. And that wraps everything up for today's episode. If you enjoyed yourself, please be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're interested in watching my videos regularly, and if you feel like adding some extra support to the channel, you can always join our Patreon or become a YouTube member. There are links in the description. Thanks again for watching, you're all wonderful, and until next time, stay crazy.